Good to see everyone this evening. Appreciate your being here, especially if you are a visitor. We welcome you, encourage you to come back at every opportunity you might have. I want to begin by asking you a simple question, and maybe a dumb question you'll think, but I want to ask you a question. 3 frogs are sitting on a log. 2 decide to jump off. How many are left? Think about it. 2 decide to jump off. How many are left? 3. I didn't say they jumped off. I said they decided to. You say, well, what's the point? The point is you haven't jumped off just because you make up your mind to do it. You haven't jumped off just because you decided. And the application for us is when it comes to serving God, to obeying the gospel, to living the Christian life, you can decide till the cows come home. But until you actually do it, you haven't jumped. Now, you can decide, for example, that you're going to prepare for eternity. You can decide that you are going to become a Christian, that you're going to get right with God, whatever terminology that you want to use, but just simply making the decision, I want to get right with God, I want to be a Christian, doesn't really do you any good, does it? Until you jump. Until you take the plunge. Until you step out into the aisle, come down, make the good confession, and obey the gospel. Sometimes a non-Christian, sometimes a Christian, one who's obeyed the gospel will become unfaithful. They'll fall by the wayside, and for whatever reason, maybe there's a tragedy in their life, or someone talks to them, or their conscience bothers them, but for whatever reason, they realize that they are lost, that they need to come back to get into a right relationship with God and to make things right in their lives and become a faithful Christian. Again, the fact that they've decided this is what I need to do doesn't change their spiritual condition, does it? It doesn't help them one bit to say, well, I think I'm going to do this. In Acts 26 and verse 28, the last half of that verse is a good example of what I'm talking about, just deciding and doing. There we find Paul is preaching to King Agrippa, and this was Herod Agrippa, one of the Herod family, the Herodian family. But Paul has been preaching, and Agrippa interrupts him. And he says, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Now, did Herod take the plunge? Did he obey the gospel? I don't know. Nothing is said about it in the text. In fact, nowhere throughout the rest of the book of Acts or the rest of the New Testament do we read of Herod ever obeying the gospel. You know, he decided maybe that he needed to, but deciding is as far as it went. Many people have good intentions. Many people will tell the preacher, they will tell the elders, yes, I've decided I'm going to be more faithful. I've decided I'm going to be more active, more involved. I've decided I'm going to attend the services more regularly. And on the things that preachers and elders hear that people have decided they're going to do, and nothing comes of it. And I would suggest to you that in the judgment day when we stand before God, it's going to do no good whatsoever to say, well, Lord, you know, I intended to obey the gospel. Well, I intended to be restored, or I intended to be a stronger, harder working, more faithful Christian. But it's not going to change things, is it? The Lord is still going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. And so in closing, what about you? Is there something that you need to do to prepare yourself for eternity? Is there something that you have decided mentally, I need to do this to be ready for judgment? But you have not done it yet. Have you decided to jump, but for whatever reason have never done it? Have never gotten around to it? And as I said in the very beginning, deciding isn't the same as doing. The consequences are not the same. Only by obeying the Lord's commands can we make ourselves right with God and prepare for eternity. As Hebrews 5:9 says, being made perfect, speaking of Christ, He became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey Him. If you have not obeyed the gospel, let me encourage you to do so tonight. Or if as a Christian you have not been faithful, you've not lived the kind of life that God would have you to live, then make that right. Ask for the prayers of the church. Ask your Heavenly Father's forgiveness, and He's promised to forgive and to welcome you back, just like the Father in the story of the prodigal son. This evening, if you need to respond to the invitation of Christ, don't just say, I'm going to. Say, I'll do it. Step out. Take care of it tonight. If you need to respond, won't come, will you stand and sing?